Good evening.
Good evening.
How
Here
are
we
you?
are. If I tell you the truth, I'm dragging butt. I'm still trying to figure out how to sleep on a U.S. schedule again, but it's okay. It's all right.
Okay,
It's
good.
getting better every day. Takes about 10 days, 2 weeks.
Well, good evening, everyone. Rip's unable to make to meet it with us tonight. He's taking care of Mary. She is doing to be expected, and things are going as they should. Doctors aren't getting them information as fast as they would like, but aside from that, things are going. We did check in with him and talk about her earlier today. So just wanted to get that out of the way, settle your nerves. Tonight, we're going to talk about beating the heat. Obviously, unless you're one of our friends like we talked to the other week that's up in Canada who's still having some really awkwardly hot temperatures, it's hot everywhere. I mean, I talked to a friend of mine in out of Indiana. Yeah, Indiana earlier today, and it was like 95. So it's hot everywhere. So tonight we're going to talk about beating the heat, proven ways to prevent heat stress in your birds. How's that sound, Joe?
Sounds good to me.
So we're going to start with the basics. And, chickens, they don't sweat like people do. Internal temperature averages from 104 to 107. So they're already hotter. One of the reasons why they stay warmer in the wintertime than we actually think they do. They're already hotter in the summertime. So with that, we don't want them to get hotter. They're going to be flaring their wings. They're going to be doing all that kind of stuff. They're going to pant. I mean, we're all human. The other day, a week and a half ago, I was outside for a couple of hours, drank half a gallon of water, and I was still panting. So, Jeff, how do you think would be some good ways to first look? How would you define heat stress? What would you say the scientific definition of heat stress is?
Geez, I don't know. I
In
never,
in
nobody's
in
ever
farm
asked me that
terms.
question. Yeah, I mean, you know, pretty much when you have when your day night temperatures like, and I explained this to a guy earlier today, right? You take your nighttime low, your daytime high, you add the two together, right? And you divide by two, and I'm looking at your 24-hour ambient temperature, right?
Yep.
So, if you're 100 during the day and you're 80 at night, that's 180. You're at 90-degree average. You need to do something at 90-degree average. Um, I should slow down. Not everyone does math the same as I do. So,
Yeah,
but
we have
anyway,
learned that a lot lately.
okay. Anyway, sorry. But, pretty much when you're 80 plus, 85 plus, we need to start looking for ways to make the birds a little bit more comfortable.
Right.
And we've talked about it a lot over the years on the show, individually with people in the groups. There's a lot of things you can do. Okay. So, I can run right down through the checklist if you like, but number one is shade. Two, you try and orient your pens or whatever's holding your birds to capture as much natural airflow as there can be. Right. And I realize there's days here coming up in August, right? The air don't move and it just, sits there and bakes you.
Hmm.
So shade, capture as much airflow as you can. You
Right.
can even consider getting some of the big livestock fans. They make 4-foot fans, right? So if your birds are in a housed area, right, you don't have them out on runs where they can get shade and fresh air or moving air. Um, you got to invest in fans. And nowadays you can do fans with misters, right? You can put little mister kits on the front of those fans, and it ain't rocket science. And you can move like almost like a homemade swamp cooler. So,
Look,
um,
so last year when we talked about that, I got the idea. I looked on Amazon, which is one of my favorite places to look for stuff. because I don't have a gardening supply house local to me. So I got one of the kits, a pressure reducer to drop your hose pipe pressure down to like 25 pounds. And I think it had like 200 feet of quarter-inch tube in it, a bunch of T's, and little mister nozzle to go on the other part of the T. And what I did was I ran part of it through my fence area, and then I just started running it through my breeder pens up towards the top. And once I got it in place throughout everything, which took most of the 200 feet, um, I just went back and zip tied on the wire the hose to keep it in place. And then I cut a notch, put my P in there with the connections, and man, my birds, I put the garden hose thing on a timer to have it come on from 11 to 1:30 in the afternoon, and they like
Yeah, I mean, the first and second time they come on, the birds kind of freak out about it because it's new
Yep,
and it's different,
they
right?
did.
And after about 3 days, they figure out, you know, this feels really good, and they're all in, right? Not a problem.
And I'll also say this in August, like you're talking about earlier, with no wind, when the true dog days of summer, typically it's also very dry. And I didn't like my birds' feathers had more sheen to them than they had any other summer. And I attribute that to the the misters. Like it worked out really well. And a lot of my pens also have a 12-inch fan in the top that blows air down, and it just blows straight down, but it keeps air moving even when the wind's not. So that they really like that.
Well, now your sheen also, you've over the last couple of years, you've been constantly like tweaking and improving your feed formula. So there, I'm not saying that the misters helped and keeping them comfortable helped, and the summer will dry out feathers. That's 100% true. But with the corrections you've made to the feed by getting the fat levels right, getting the amino acids and the proteins and everything else where they need to be, you're enabling the bird to maintain that healthier look longer,
Yeah.
right?
And I mean that also helped. I'm not going to say that eliminated the heat stress
No.
by no means, but it definitely made it better. I feel like with the fans and the water.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And trying to figure out, and not everybody can do this, right? You can do this. Some people can do this, but when you get a feed formula where you can reduce the corn and you have that higher fat level,
Hmm.
you're getting your energy. You're getting more energy from fat, which has the least amount of body heat increase during
Hmm.
digestion, right? And so imagine this, but um, corn has 1,500 calories per pound. Fat has, like, cooking oil and dietary fat has 4,000, right? So it's a 2.5 to 1 offset. So for like every 2.5 pounds of fat added to the diet,
Hmm.
or for every 1 pound of fat, I can replace 2.5 pounds of corn. Because when starch and carbohydrates digest, and we know this, right? I mean, you go eat a high starchy diet in the middle of August, and
You're
your
going to get
body
really
just,
hot.
yes, right, because it requires a lot of oxygen. It pulls a lot of oxygen to break those carbohydrates and starches down, and during that oxidation process, you have increased body heat, right? You don't
Hmm.
have nearly that body heat increase from using higher levels of fat. Okay. But that's, now the commercial industry uses vitamin C. So they'll add between 1 and 2 pounds of ascorbic acid, but technical name for vitamin C.
Right, right.
So people could consider, like we've told people about um, the homemade electrolyte mix, you know,
Yep.
and you could actually add some lemon juice to that, or some vitamin C, and even kick that up a notch as far as relieving heat stress. Um, as it is, it does a nice job of relieving heat stress. But if you wanted to take it to the next level, adding some natural vitamin C to that mix is going to get you even further. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, commercial industry manages heat stress by adding vitamin C. Plus, they have, all their barns have big fans in them. They're moving air constantly. Um,
Oh yeah, they're huge fans.
huge. Yeah. And
So we
yeah.
have a question here.
Hey,
Cassie wants to know what suggestions do we have to beat the heat when your birds are stuck at a fair or any other poultry show for that matter.
not a whole lot you're going to do other than, like I said, if you did the homemade electrolyte mix, or, you buy it, but, and adding some vitamin C to that mix, so that base mix is 2 ounces of vinegar, apple cider vinegar, 1 ounce molasses, 1 tablespoon of grated ginger, um, a teaspoon of salt, and like a quarter teaspoon of Tabasco sauce. The reason for the Tabasco sauce, folks, is it dilates tissue in the digestive tract, which
Hmm.
allows for faster absorption. Okay. We're not trying to make Mexican chickens. That's not the purpose here. So it actually has a scientific purpose for the mix being in the mix. Now, to that mix, you could add 2 ounces of lemon juice, or some type of vitamin C delivery.
Squeeze an
You
orange.
know, yeah, um, and it helps with the flavor. The birds are going to appreciate it, and it's going to take you up a notch on that heat stress management for sure.
And I'll also add one thing that I have done when transporting birds, which should also be done at a show. Um, we have, everybody knows that we have toddlers. And at one point, a couple of years ago, we took some of the kids to Disney World, and we got a battery powered fan to clip onto a stroller. And over the years, transporting chickens in the summertime, like in an enclosed trailer, I have used that battery powered fan to help cool the birds. So if you got some that are stuck, just stick the fan out there by them. I'm sure the birds next to them will appreciate it too.
Yeah, battery operated fan, or a rechargeable battery operated fan definitely is a good option. Um, you see a lot of those people carrying them in hotter places, so
Hmm.
it's yeah.
Also, the ones that are battery powered that have the squirt bottles on them, you could hit your bird with that every now and then. That would help out too while you're at a fair.
Hmm.
So, what are some ways that we could, let's say you're hot too, because it feels like it's 110 outside. What's some ways that you could go out there, quickly check on your birds during the day and know, hey, we got a problem. We've got heat stress, like they're showing signs. We need to do something. What are some things that you can look at and see on your birds to know real quick that there's a problem?
You know, uh, you already mentioned it, but they're going to have their wings flared. They're going to have their wings lifted, allowing more airflow under the wing, where there's a lot of trapped heat, and those are the early signs. And then you're actually going to see open mouth breathing, like panting going on. And
Mm-hmm.
by the
Mm-hmm.
time you get to panting, I start to worry, because now they're respirating out more moisture, you know, by breathing through their open beak than breathing through their nostrils. So
Right.
they're transpiring more moisture. it's being expelled out through the lung. And we just got to make sure, you know, working across many different genres of poultry keepers, I honestly will tell you the number one mistake I see is people put their drinking or their drinkers in direct sunlight, and that is the number one mistake. Chickens are not sun worshippers, right? And I've watched a lot of chickens die because they would rather sit in the shade and not drink than have to go out into direct sunlight, between 10 and like 3 in the afternoon. They
Mm-hmm.
they will avoid going out there to drink that water. Plus, the water's really hot being in that direct sunlight. So
Yeah.
just not a good combination. A couple years ago, I had suggested to Carol Wilson down in Odessa, Texas, to get some cheap, like 20 quart coolers, 24 quart cooler, whatever, cheap cooler, right? And plumb those up to run gravity flow to her drinkers. And in there, then she could freeze like 1 gallon, blocks of ice,
Mm-hmm.
fill that up with water, and um, fill that up with water, and could be serving cold water all day, right? Through whether it's a small nipple line or something like that.
So what I started doing is I'll go to a show and I'll see the half-gallon water cups that they have for the cages, the cage cups that are like ginormous. If you take those and put, all the way but about an inch worth of water in them, put that in your deep freeze in the afternoon, they'll freeze overnight.
Yep.
And, everybody knows that I have a lot of automatic waters that use a 5-gallon bucket as a reservoir. I'll put 3 or 4 of those in the bucket and it cools down everything that's in the line. And those huge chunks of ice will last several hours, even in hot water. So that, I know it's not ice water, but it's a lot better. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I've seen this in several groups, is a lot of people, when they do see their birds panting or they see watery droppings, they panic and then they want to go get ice water and give it to the chickens. Um, Personally, I've wondered if that would not cause them to go in shock. And so I wanted to ask you about your opinion and how you felt on that.
They're not going to go into shock, but they're not going to drink as much of that as we want them to. Okay, so really cold water, like below, say, 50 degrees, they're going to avoid drinking that just as much as they're going to avoid drinking water that's over 100 degrees because it's been in the sunlight.
Right.
Okay. So if we can keep water like 65 to 85 degrees, they're going to drink that. Okay. Because it's still way lower than their body temperature.
Yeah.
But, I see a lot of waterers out there. I see a lot of drinkers. And if you went out and did a temperature check at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in some climates, right, it's going to be well over 100 degrees. And,
Mm-hmm.
the bird only drinks it because it needs to, not really because it likes it.
Right.
Um, so figuring out a way to serve some cooler water, right? Particularly during the peak heat, like from noon to 4, is
Mm-hmm.
going to be pretty critical. Um, I don't know how everybody does that. I don't have a system in my mind that's going to work for everybody. Like I had suggested to you earlier today and yesterday is, if I had a circulation system where the water was always moving, one, that encourages, everybody knows a chicken likes to go chase water. And why they do that, I don't know, but they like moving water. So if you could have a recirculation system, you could actually have that come back to one single large reservoir that is on a float, that's automatically getting filled. You can pump it with like a pond pump or something like that, low voltage, doesn't take a lot. But keeping that moving now, you could put a larger chunk of ice in that reservoir to keep that water, at a really nice temperature. And it sounds like a lot of work, and people, I can see their eyes rolling back in their head. But I've seen this working with a little bit of thought. Just a recirculation system, especially if your pens are all lined up in a straight row, or if your birds are all in one group. Working on a circulating system of water, they for sure drink more water, right? That's And the more water I can get into them through this upcoming, next month, is going to be really important.
Well, and not only that, when you're raising, when you hatch out chicks, them drinking a lot of water as a chick is also very important. So something like that wouldn't just benefit in the summertime; it would benefit
Oh yeah.
year round, because in the wintertime, running water is not going to be as susceptible to freezing
Yep.
as still water. So, which is, kind of the twofold behind my thought process. What I was originally thinking is using some gutters and put gutters in the pens, like a foot section or whatever, and then using a flexible hose to connect them, and just have a pump pushing water to them all the time and pulling it back into like a 30-gallon drum and circulating that way. But I'm going to try it on a smaller scale. I've got a couple of single pens that I'm going to try it with, because I know, there's the size of the hose, the size of everything is going to play into a factor with pumping it and keeping the level up and all that mess.
Well, what size drinkers are you using?
Right now, the birds in this area have half-gallon cage cups.
Those are pretty large. Now, just now we're taking this to a personal conversation level, but I think people might be able to gain something from it. The 1/4 inch rubber tubing, some
Hmm.
people refer to it as spaghetti tubing.
Hmm.
Um, if you drill the right size hole and you almost compress fit it into that hole, right? You don't need a whole lot of fittings and other things.
Yeah,
It's kind of amazing on its own. So if you have that now pumping where it's pulling, right? Um,
pulling instead of pushing.
yeah.
See, I thought about that too. If I've got it pulling instead of pushing, it would probably be more even. So I'm thinking about that, because what I have seen is take a small torch and drill a small hole, use the torch to heat the hole up, push the tube through, and when it cools back down, it's really tight against the tube. I've seen that too.
Yeah. I mean, you don't even need the torch. The pastured poultry folks do this all the time. So you just measure your 1/4 inch spaghetti tubing,
Hmm.
right? And you get a drill that's just under that by about a 16th of an inch. And if you cut it on an angle, you can get it started in the hole, grab it with a pair of pliers and pull it right in. And
Hey, there we
it,
go.
it doesn't leak. It'll hold itself.
And see, here's Bud right here with it. The Plasson, which he knows for sure that I'm a huge fan of the Plasson Bell Waters.
Hmm.
Their 1/4 inch line that's made by Plasson has you use a 5/16 hole and you can pull it through like that.
Yeah, because I think the outside measurement on most of those tubes is 3/8. So being that
Hmm.
16th under, you can,
Get it.
there's enough compression slash friction to pull it through there, and it's not going to leak. And I see this all the time. So it's a pretty simple situation. Um,
And I will say this: I have tried. Don't cheap out on the rubber hose. Buy the good stuff, and buy the black, because everybody's like, "Oh, black is summertime. It's going to be a lot hotter." Yeah, but you're not going to have algae in it,
yeah,
and you're not going to have it pop in the wintertime. On my Plasson bells in the wintertime, the only place that froze was the little rip around the lip around that they drank out of. Pop that a couple times with a knife, chip it out, water comes back in. So that's worked out really good. Rob Guerin wants to know what's the deal with his birds basing in the sun on a very hot day? Are they trying to kill feather mites or something? Um, they'll fan near their wings out and act like they're trying to get every bit of sun they can.
And I sat here and read that 3 times. And Rob, I have no idea why your birds are doing that. Now, look, admittedly, I see chickens all the time. They'll pull into the sunshine and they'll bask, like he's referring to. I generally don't see them do it for more than about 30 minutes. And once they reach a certain temperature or light stimulation, then they're back in the shade. So, I'll see them do it periodically, but never really for more than an hour at a time. But not every breed of chicken's the same, right? Like, in turkeys, for instance, they don't care, right? They don't, sunlight doesn't bother them
Mm-hmm.
nearly as much as a chicken. Um, but, chickens all were derived, they, my understanding is they all pretty much come from the old Asian game fowl, and then they've been bred for specific traits and crossed and whatever to get where they are today. But everything, what I've been told by people smarter than me, is all chickens are originated from um, birds that live in the jungle or under a tree canopy. So
That's what
they
I've heard too. They all came
yeah,
from jungle fowl,
yeah,
and they've been bred to do whatever over the
yeah.
years. I get it, selective breeding. You can do a lot with that.
And his are solid black birds, which and I don't know how long they're basking in the sun. Just my observations, I'll see him do it. And when I had chickens here in the backyard, yep, I'd see him do it maybe an hour, and that was usually all they could tolerate, and then they're moving on. But my birds seem to prefer morning sun. While it was still a
Yeah.
little cooler, and like late morning, they would catch some late morning sun, but never more than an hour. So
I mean,
everybody,
mine will do it too. They'll get in the sunlight and they'll scratch the dirt up to make it a little loose if it's not already, and they'll flop around in that crap like
yep.
they're having a stroke or something, and then they'll just stand up and okay, I'm ready to get out of the heat now. Like, well, I was ready to get out of here a long time ago. What do y'all do? Um, what's some other stuff that you could do that might help besides keeping the water good? Now, I will ask this. I got to, it's highly controversial in some areas on the
Don't do it.
interwebs.
Don't do it.
Apple cider vinegar. There,
I,
there's that group that understands the commercial industry, pumps that stuff into their birds' water year round. And then there's the other ones that swear if you do it in the summertime, you're being cruel and to your chickens and you're going to harm them.
I, I can, for the life of me, I cannot figure out where they're coming up with that like they're causing some sort of like lactic acidosis or something like that. They're creating more stress and they're dehydrating. I don't know where that theory comes from. I really don't. Okay, so I can't even track it back to see if it's valid, see if it's craziness or whatever. So I don't know if somebody knows the science behind that, where I can do some research. Send me a link. I'll read into it. But for 30 years, I can only speak to my 30 years. Is we've been putting 1 ounce per gallon of apple cider vinegar per gallon of water, right? And I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of chickens, and a lot of them are getting it year round, not just during the summer, right? So, we've seen increased feed efficiency, 5 to 7%. Um, the demeanor of the bird becomes calmer, more relaxed. Um, the the commercial industry knows that you want the pH of a chicken's gut to be slightly acidic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, they're trying to, well, it depends on which article you read. Some are driving it down all the way to 4 pH, which is really low, but between 5.5, 6, is kind of where they're happy. Um, so the commercial industry is pumping citric acid, right, into their chicken water all the time.
Yep.
And so I have no idea where that's coming from. I can, I don't know where that thought or, uh, anyway.
I mean, I've entertained it a couple times, and I've asked them. I'm like, okay, you stake that claim, and it contradicts what I said. Can you please show me, like, the research? What is that based off of? And the lady said, well, I've had chickens for 30 years, and da 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 da. That's great. Have you ever actually taken notes and checked it out and measured the stuff? Anyway, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Um,
And adding vinegar to livestock and poultry water been done longer than I've been alive. Okay. So this is not here, and when I get this question from by individuals, I'm like, okay, do this. All right. Put a water out with just plain water or whatever you want to put in it. Okay. And put a water out, with the vinegar in it, and let the chickens tell you, see which one gets empty first. Right. Let the chickens choose. You didn't force them into drinking it. Right. You didn't deprive them of fresh, clean water. You know, the chickens will tell you what they want, and
mhm.
it's not going to take long till you figure out that they prefer the one with vinegar. Now, is it stimulating them at another level that we're not aware of? I don't know, but
Who knows, right?
I've been doing it for years, and I've been recommending it and doing it for years. Um, anyway, it's you know what? You look around the internet long enough, you can find something that'll tell you exactly what you want to hear, or something that'll scare you to death. Right? So
Either way.
either way,
So let's talk more about the importance of air movement, especially in coops. I've seen people talk about how they can't get their birds in their coop at night. I'm like, well, what's the temperature inside there? It's been baking all day. Do you have air movement? What's the importance of air movement, especially this time of year in the coops?
there's a lot of coops that really deprive air movement. Right? Not enough windows. Just yeah. So I don't blame them either. Right? You know, when I was a kid, we didn't have air conditioning. I'd rather sleep outside in a tent than I would just sleep in my bedroom. Right? So it's no different. And so if your coop is not well ventilated and good air transfer, you got other issues anyway, because now you got bad air in the coop. But those coops need to be ventilated, right? And they need to be well ventilated.
Yeah.
Um,
What about frozen? I see people talk about cantaloupes. I see them talk about watermelon, whether it be frozen or cold and putting it out in the runs. What about that kind of stuff?
yeah, I did the same thing with mine. Here's the thing: is if you overdo like vegetables, fruit, those types of scraps or treats or whatever you want to call them,
Hmm.
your egg whites and your eggs in general will become very runny, because you've increased the amount of moisture intake, but you've diluted the amount of feed that they ate and the amount of protein that they ate. So, like, I had chickens in the backyard, man. I'm like everybody else. I give them a half a watermelon. A day or so later, you crack one of those eggs and it ran all the way across the pan. Well, before I did the watermelon, it stood there in a nice circle and stood up tall and had really firm whites and really good yolk. So it's going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not telling you not to do it, and you're not really going to hurt your chicken, but the eggs are going to change. The quality of the egg will change. So Just know that, right? Don't freak out. Don't give them Corid. Don't give them medications. You did it, right? So
Yeah.
I tell everybody don't exceed more than 10% supplementation with vegetable waste or like watermelon and cantaloupe.
Hmm.
So that's really a small amount, right? If you think about, okay, your chicken should be eating about 3 to 4 ounces of feed a day.
Yep.
10% of that is about a half an ounce.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not much.
See, what
And
we do is, my wife, she'll take a watermelon and cut the part that we eat out and leave the rind and with a little bit of meat on it. And she'll cut it into strips or chunks or whatever. And I'll have a huge bowl of that, and I'll throw a couple of them in each of the pens just for that reason. Also, a lot of times you see people wanting to give their birds extra treats that are high in protein this time of year. What are your thoughts on that?
um, I, I, you
Don't?
know, I don't, yeah, you know, treats are treats, and people tend to get carried away, right? And look, I
Yeah.
got pets. I got pets as well, and I am guilty, or I have in the past been guilty of giving my pets too many treats. And one, they become dependent on them, and they expect them. Like they won't even eat their feed, or until you show up with the mealworms or whatever your treat's going to be. Or so you know treat is supposed to be something occasional. um, so just be careful how much you're treating them. I mean, mealworms are really not that much higher in protein. Neither are black soldier fly larvae and some of these other treats. So you are throwing things off a little bit. Look, you have to you have to be honest with yourself. Okay, why are you keeping chickens? If your chickens are a pet, give them all the treats you want. You're not going to hurt them. Do what you got to do. If you're keeping chickens to be a professional breeder or exhibition bird, you're going to throw things off, right?
Hmm.
If you have a truly properly balanced diet, all you're doing is messing that up,
Yep.
right? So, if you want to give them a treat, why don't you give them some alfalfa hay, right? Hang it in the bag, let them chase it around. You know, um, you want to have some fun with them, and you want to give them a treat. Put a few live minnows in their drinker, right, and let them chase those around, right, and they'll love them. But don't just. There's no need to. We start treating them like our kids or our family, and for some people they are, right? I'm not stepping on toes, but you have to make that conscious decision of what is the purpose of your chickens, in your system, right? So if they're pets, then treat them like pets. If they're breeders or show, right, don't be doing that. Just throwing
People
things off.
people say to me, they're like, "Well, but I, I want this, but I'm like, well, I mean, is the bird for show? Do you want the bird? Is this something that you put on display, or is it a pet? Well, what are you talking about? Well, let's look at this. Do you think an Olympic athlete varies from their diet far? Probably not. Just like supermodels, you know, people that do go on the runway. Do you think they vary from their diet? Probably not. They probably follow a very strict regimen. So, you know, keep that in mind when you're giving those. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some emergency heat stress response ideas.
We would like to take a short break to express our appreciation to the Fertrell Company for their sponsorship of the Poultry Keepers 360 Live programming. Fertrell has been a trusted name in sustainable farming and poultry nutrition for decades, and their commitment to providing high-quality, natural product aligned perfectly with the values we hold dear in our poultry community. Thank you, Trail, for partnering with us to empower poultry keepers everywhere. We're truly grateful for your dedication and support.
Those birds didn't look miserable at all.
No, but they were in the shade.
That they were.
Yeah.
Like John says, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Tell people with pet chickens that if they eat those chickens, they can love them twice.
Oh, geez.
That is a good one.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see here. We got another one. What can be used to clean the water cups? I have well water that builds up in the cups.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing he's got harder water. I don't know if he's got iron, high iron, or if he's got calcium. Depends on what color the residue is. Of course, iron will be rusty red and calcium will be white and manganese will be black. So it just depends on what's in there. There's no good answer, Dan. I mean, other than pulling the cups and, just scrubbing them like crazy. So
one of the things that I've done that has made a huge difference for me is, everybody knows that I was using a filter on my hose pipes for my waterers. Well, that was just a regular water filter. They also make them that are for mineral filters, specifically for people that are on wells. And since doing that, I have had even less problems in my water lines. I'm not getting any of that anymore because even though I'm on city water, I was still having a lot of the white buildup in some of my waterers.
Yeah, unless you can figure out a way to soften the water somehow, it's going to be. It just depends on the hardness, for you and Dan. It's depends on that total hardness of the water.
Let's see. What about, could you do like maybe use some bowls or something like that? Put some cool water in that for them to get in. Will chickens walk around in water like that?
They will. There's some people that'll use something like a kiddie pool, and I actually, I saw one lady was taking like the low height kind of Rubbermaid containers and freezing like 1.5 inches, 2 inches of, ice. She would even put the cantaloupe and the watermelon in there kind of as a frozen treat, and they could work their way to it. Right. So by the time it melted, they also had something to eat. Right. But
that'd be cool.
I saw pictures of the chickens just standing on top of that ice block as it was melting, and, they were cooling off their feet. So yeah, that's the thing. And they will walk in cool water, right? Once they figure it out. Okay. First time you ever do something for chickens, they're like, wait, this isn't normal. This isn't right. And
yeah, they're like, what is this? This is different.
Yeah. You got to give them time to figure it out. And
all right, let's see. Avoiding cold shock.
You mean like serving them too cold of water?
Yeah, that was one of the things that was mentioned in the topic.
I've never seen it happen. They just won't drink it. But again, you're leading to dehydration because if it's too cold, they won't drink it. Right. Even here, even here in our winters, if that water wasn't above 45 or 50 degrees, there was a significant reduction in water intake, and of course, then that reduces the feed intake and that reduces the number of eggs laid. And, it's the trickle down effect.
It's a snowball effect from there.
Yeah. Right. So, they'll drink it at 50, 45, 50. They don't like it as much. Like I said, 65 to 80, somewhere in there is really good water temperature for them. That's where they're going to be happier.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Found out the pH and alkalinity is high in my water. Retested the water after adding apple cider vinegar to drop it to 7 and the alkalinity between 0 and 40.
It's good.
I say that sounds really good.
And those pH test strips are not, you know, they're not that expensive. You can buy them, I don't know, 20 or 50 or whatever in a little tube, right? And as long as you keep them in a good storage place, they're good for years. So you can check your own pH.
So I actually buy them personally about 100 at a time. That's what's in the little black. It's a little black container. It's about 3 inches long. It's got the chemical reaction strip, and on the outside's a sticker. You match the color to know your pH.
Yep.
But I want to say it's like 12, 13 bucks on Amazon for 100 of them.
Yeah, they're not expensive.
Because every once in a while I do check the pH of mine as well. Rob says that you can use the nipples and then you won't have to clean anything.
I'm really glad you put that up because I'm going to challenge you, Rob. Okay. Do a flush and a clean out of that nipple line where the water's being held before it comes out of the nipple. And because I've seen nipple lines cleaned in commercial houses and they are grungy, dirty, nasty, not good at all. So the line going to the nipples, the PVC that holds the nipples, definitely if yours are nipples in a line, yeah, you need to flush that line probably quarterly. I would say every 90 days or more, minimum every 90 days. There's some really nasty stuff. And in the commercial houses, they use some really strong, like chlorhexidine combinations to flush those. Yeah.
Dang.
And they'll do it more than once, right? They'll do it, they wait, they'll fill the line with that solution. They'll let it set for 24 hours. They'll flush that out. They'll redo it, and
so they just put in some temporary waters when they do it.
No. They do this when there's no birds in the house, right? But between
Okay,
birds.
so when they're flipping the house.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can't do it with birds in the house.
I was thinking, say, how the crap do they do that with them in there?
Right. If they do it with the birds in the house, if they feel the need to do that while the birds are in the house, they'll raise the lines up so the birds can't access the nipples. Like they'll do one line at a time, and
got it.
They can do a flush, but the bird can't actually drink that water, until they've flushed it, multiple times to get fresh water back into it. Yeah, because that stuff will kill them. So it's nasty.
Let's see. He says he uses cups and he has a drain plug at the end of the line to clean it out once a week, or even when it's hot, cleans it out every other day.
That's John. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yep.
Open that valve up and just let it all out. Do that.
I wonder, is Rob on city water? It may already be chlorinated, and that may be,
that may be the difference for him.
That may be the difference for him. But
and I can say that since I started running mine through filters, I've seen a lot less problems.
Right.
Yeah. So he said it's city water. His is city water.
Okay. Yeah. So it's already being treated to some degree. And, he may have good city water compared to a lot of people. Aren't you on city water, Carrie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wouldn't call yours good city water.
My city water straight out of the kitchen sink. If you smell it, you won't drink it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen other people, same situation. I don't know even how the municipality can consider it safe to drink, but they put enough chlorine in it, right? And it's bacteria free.
And they send you out that good old test report every quarter to
Yeah.
disclose everything that's in it if you can read it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't drink it. If we have no bottled water, we'll use water that's filtered through the refrigerator. There's a filter on the line behind the refrigerator, and there's a filter inside the refrigerator. Sue says she was on the fence about apple cider vinegar. She used it last week. Huge positive change.
If I can get more water into them because there's apple cider vinegar in that water, that's a win. Okay. So, the more water I can get into them this time of year, I'm happy. So, like I said, try it, see what you think. I ain't trying to sell you a used car here, and I ain't making a nickel off of telling you to use it. So,
it is what it is,
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? We got a few minutes left.
Laura had a question about lime. You skipped over.
Let's see. Oh, okay, yeah.
I got it.
What's the difference between non-slip barn lime and plain barn lime?
The particle size. So what they do for the non-slip lime is they run it across the screen and they keep everything that's similar to like a sand like particle.
Mhm.
So when the livestock walk on it, it actually acts as traction. And even when it gets wet, it doesn't get slippery. Whereas the pulverized lime, when it gets wet, it gets really slippery.
Yeah.
So
Especially on concrete.
It's just basically particle size, the grittiness and the texture. So.
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, heat stress is real, folks. So we just need to make sure we're doing the best we can to try and
Is
keep
a high
it cool.
content of fluoride bad for the chickens?
That's like talking politics and religion, and I'm not going to touch that one, John. So, you do your own research, but
yeah,
me personally, I don't have fluoridated water. Okay. There's no fluoride in my water. I've been on a well for I don't know how long, and I
still
ain't looking
alive.
back. Yep.
Yeah, you can use it under pine shavings.
Yeah.
Let's see. Rob says that the 50-gallon barrel that he used came from the Coca-Cola bottling factory. Smelled like Dr. Pepper for the first. Man, that's an awesome smell.
Man, I want to be a chicken at Rob's place.
Man,
you give me Dr. Pepper water, man. Come on.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Let's see here. 2x4 horse panel section attached to the side of the coop, 55-gallon plastic barrel on the outside of the coop, cut off at 10-gallon mark, garden hose notched, freeze miser in the winter.
Yeah. Garden hose with a nozzle cracked.
Yeah.
Keep it topped off, and they add a freeze miser in the winter. So.
Yeah, and I use a lot of float valves in my buckets. And they have a Y adapter. So going into the float valve is a Y adapter. And I use those freeze misers. I figured out why they can get away with charging what they do for them, because they're worth it. You replace a water line in your chicken yard in the middle of the winter, and you'll want to get them too. You guys are awesome. Look forward to seeing you at APA. Mine helped me with Bud. He wanted to watch you guys while I'm killing myself in the heat in the kitchen from canning. I'm so sorry. We try to help y'all with Bud, but I mean, we all love him, but you can only do so much. Let's see here. Rob says mine uses a pipe heater on the PVC pipe off the barrel with nipples. Works great. That does work great. I have also, so what we were talking about earlier when Jeff was telling y'all about what I'm going to do with the flowing water is I'm going to use an aquarium heater. I have a friend of mine that lives in Wisconsin, and she has quail. She uses a 4-inch water pipe beside her on the end of her quail water cages, and has the nipples in them. And in the wintertime, with snow stacked up against that thing, that water hasn't frozen. And all she has in it is a aquarium heater that she puts all the way down at the bottom of it. Hot air rises. She doesn't have any problem. So,
Look, I built a wooden box out of 1x8 and I use the old fashioned 5-gallon, white and red fountain drinker because I had one group of chickens. I didn't have multiple pens. So I put an electrical box, a light socket, and an incandescent bulb under there, right? And I drilled a hole, ran a cord, plugged it in. Here's the thing. At 9 o'clock at night, when I was going to bed, I could look out the window, and if I saw this pink glow in the chicken yard,
yep.
I knew the next morning my chicken's water would not be frozen. Okay.
Yeah.
So, look, it was simple. I lined the box with that foil-sided insulation board, 1-inch thick insulation board, foiled, and I just made the box so that drinker would sit on the edges, and it worked great. I was happy. So,
I mean, that makes sense. I've also seen another thing people will do with getting a light socket in like an outdoor type housing, put in the incandescent bulb, put a concrete block on top of it, and set the bucket on top of that. However you do it, there's a lot of different ways.
Right, the 8-inch wooden box got it up to the right height, so they didn't waste as much water. And like I said, that nice pink glow at night, right before I go to bed, I could look out my bedroom window. I could sleep with confidence that I wasn't going to have frozen water in the morning. So,
the only issue with using an incandescent bulb these days is they're getting harder and harder to find.
Yeah, I hope they come back. I really hope they come back. So, but yeah, I hear you.
Do we have any other questions? Let's see here. Bird bath heater in the bucket, and it works in Wisconsin. That's good. I have seen a couple people doing that as well.
Yep.
Anything like that'll work.
Whatever works for you, right? There's not a one size fits all perfect situation, right? You need to adapt to your environment and make it work.
Yep. Same in the summertime, same in the winter. We're from all over on this show, and you got to figure out what works. We were actually looking at the dynamics a while back, and literally all over the world. So, all right. Well, with that, we will say good night. We will see y'all in 2 weeks.
Good night, everybody.